And with that, I will sit down. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Mr. Loder.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow my honourable friend and neighbour, the member for South Dorset, not just today, of course, but it feels as though that we repeat this year after year. I followed my honourable friend last year, if I recall correctly. And of course, one of the downsides of following such an excellent constituency MP and neighbour is that he has all the lines in his speech that I want to share as well. But I have a few extras to share, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that are very important. The first is I would like to thank the government very much indeed for the investment it continues to show with our very important policing. With its 287 million, I think, is impressive, and I'm very pleased that we are being able to have this debate. It's a step forward, but we do know, of course, that there are things that we need to address with it. From Dorset's perspective, there is a lot of good news to be able to share in terms of what the force has indeed achieved, and I think that is in no mean feat down to the Police and Crime Commissioner, David Sidgwick. The fact that over the last year we have seen the rural crime team quadruple in size to tackle some of the most difficult rural crimes that in many cases have not had the attention that has been necessary for many years. Operation Viper is the drug enforcement initiative launched in April 2022. Dorset Police have made huge strides forward with that. The first 6 weeks alone saw £100,000 worth of illegal drugs seized and 29 arrests to go with it. 48 cuckoo prevention visits and 22 arrests as well related to that in 1 week, as well as seizing 146 wraps of heroin and crack cocaine with various weapons too. These were not headlines that I could share with the House this time last year. And I think it's very important for us all to note that there has been an important step forward, even though when we were having this conversation and this debate last year, we were in actually a very, very difficult position. I was not happy at all with the increase in funding that we were faced with, because we were at the bottom of the table. I think we were 40 out of 41 constabularies across the country. But it is important, I think, for us also to note that we've come up that scale somewhat, and I think it's an important consideration in terms of fairness that we are now at 28 of that out of that table, that league table of 41. And whilst I note, and I intervened on the honourable gentleman for County Durham, in terms of his points made, it's really important that we actually start to understand underneath the mechanism what actually has been going on and what I think the government is looking to start to correct. Because whilst the honourable gentleman made reference to Gwent and Merseyside and others in his speech, actually the reality is that per capita those forces have received higher funding than anywhere else in the country for a very long time. And I note specifically Cleveland, for example. You know, the Police and Crime Commissioner, fairly new Police and Crime Commissioner there, is having to deal with many, many difficult issues. But it's, it should be, I think, of note to the House that more often than not, it is Labour Police and Crime Commissioners that are fortunate enough to have that per capita income, whereas often the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioners don't. And what we have seen, I think, from the report in front of us that we're debating today, is that actually we are starting to make strides ahead in terms of fairness. Now, that said, we didn't also ought to just forget that the difference and the split, if you like, between government funding and local funding through the precept is fair. Now, my right honourable friend, the member for South West Bedfordshire, made a comment to his situation earlier. I'm not sure if I'm right or my honourable friend and neighbour is right, but I had 49% of our funding is from the precept. That is much, much more than the vast majority of other constabularies. 49%. That is enormous. I should be delighted to give way to it.
The Honourable's got to look at the facts. In the league table, Dorset is number 6. I mean, its increase in spending in this round will be 4.2%. Cleveland, which he mentions, is 3.12%. So I don't blame him for arguing for his area. That's exactly what he's elected to do. But the facts that he's arguing that somehow Dorset is badly done to compared to other areas, I'm sorry, it's not.
Well, as always, can I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his intervention. I think the reality is that we are playing years and years and years of catch-up where the overall financial settlement for policing has been directed to areas such as his and other members in the House that have benefited year after year after year. And the reality is that it's the good people of Dorset and Bedfordshire and other counties that actually have been bearing the brunt of the policing costs to enable the government to direct its finance capability to help areas such as his. And I'm very conscious of the fact that crime dynamics will be different. And I'm not suggesting that that is not the case. But I think the reality is that we have faced a particular problem in rural areas, in just a moment, a particular problem in rural areas when it comes to county lines drugs, with rural crime. We in Dorset have survived for years with just 3 officers in the rural crime team. 3 officers, we have survived with that. But to be honest with you, we haven't been able to do the crime statistics justice, which is why I make mention to those points at the very beginning of my speech, Mr Deputy Speaker, because I think that's important to know. I'm happy to give way to the Honourable Lady.
Thank you for giving way. I very much appreciate it. But surely the need is about meeting needs. If you look at Merseyside, we have a port. We import crime. Drugs come through the port. There's all kinds of organised crime. Do you have that in your area? No, you don't. Where do we get the finance to handle that from? Where do we get the finance? You have to put the funds where it's needed. And that's what we're not getting. We're not getting the truth. If you want people, if it's a desire for us to work together to tackle the needs of communities, then let's be honest and let's work together. But it's no use standing up giving false statistics and disproportionate amounts of. Even the Prime Minister, the former Chancellor, boasted about shifting these funds away from these areas, the red wall areas, as he referred to other areas. And he boasted this in his own campaign, so you can't deny it.
Can I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention? I do value her points in response to some of the things I've said. I think the first thing to note is that I would agree with her to an extent that in West Dorset, and I'm sure it's probably the same in South Dorset as well, we are dealing with county lines coming from Merseyside that actually cause us great difficulty. Now, I'm sorry, I've given way to the lady once. I need to respond to the points she's made. But for me, the great frustration is that when I look at the per capita funding for policing, I see consistently, year after year after year, that Merseyside has benefited from considerably extra funding in order to help deal with these issues, whilst we in Dorset and other particular rural constabularies in the country have suffered. It might not be fair for me to say at the expense of other areas, but it is fair to say, I think, that we have cut our cloth to fit, and we have now got to the situation. We now have got to the situation where actually we have had to act, because we also are in the situation now where, say, a third of the population increases by a third in seasonal time, in the summertime. I know the lady's particularly keen to intervene again. I'll happily give way to her, but for the last time.
Yes, I fully accept.
Intervention be brief this time, please.
I accept what you're saying about county lines. We've had major issues and there's a lot of work goes on. So yes, they do come out. A lot of them come out of Merseyside. A lot of them come out of St Helens. But do you know that the police follow them? The Merseyside police follow the crime out of Merseyside. So a lot of our police are going out to get these people back on.
Well, I should just say, Honourable Lady, but I don't like to criticise her constabulary, but I can tell her quite clearly from my experiences they haven't been following it to Dorset, because that's been a huge problem for us. And I suspect for not just neighbouring colleagues in Dorset, but probably Somerset as well. But did you want me to give way? Yes, I should be delighted to give way.
Very quick and rather cheeky observation. Maybe perhaps useful if the police got them in Merseyside before they had to follow them all the way to Dorset.
Well, that is indeed the ideal situation, that the police would actually stem the issue at the root, and that's why I agree with some of what the Honourable Lady has to say about it. But the reality is that the funding, from what I can see, has gone to those forces and to those commissioners in order to address it, but I don't think it's happened, and that's why we have now been in a position to have to intervene. Now, I will give way to the Honourable Lady, but just very briefly, if I may.
Honourable Member for giving way. Just really, because he's talking about Merseyside and I'm a Merseyside MP, in actual fact, Merseyside was still short of 450 officers compared with 2010. So, we have had a big loss of officers. We felt it in our communities. I think that the Honourable Gentleman is agreeing with my friend on these benches about the issue of local policing actually being about national policing too.
Indeed so, but thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. But I think it's just worth noting that the point I'm making, and I will make it again, is that when it comes to per capita funding for the police, Dorset has been historically at the bottom of the pile when it comes to that, and Merseyside has been near the top. And that's the point I'm just making in comparison, in contributing to this debate. And I think it's an important one. And I think, to be honest, if either of the honourable members wish to, make the case for Merseyside in this, then it may be the opportunity to speak a little later. But I'm conscious that I'm having my fair share of time, and we probably ought to move on, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I do want to emphasise, however, that there are parts of what the government has brought forward that does not take into account some of the pressures of which we face on an annual basis. We are, as I think I've made mention earlier, the population rises by a third during the summertime. There is no measure within the current police funding arrangements to take that into account. That puts huge pressure on us in Dorset, and particularly so that we are not eligible, regrettably, to receive the violence reduction funding that indeed others are. And so I'm just very conscious of the fact that actually, there are some things that need addressing, especially so as that we are at the top of the list at the crime pressure calculation. Now, I'm not sure whether members of the House are familiar with this, but that is, of course, the severity of the crime against the number of officers available. It proves that for a long time we have had a particularly lean machine when it comes to Dorset, and I'm pleased that the government has actually pushed us up that league table for extra funds to help deal with it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would just like to conclude my remarks by saying when we were in this House 12 months ago debating this very matter, we had the debate then of the reform required for the police funding formula. My right honourable friend, the member for North West Hampshire, who's no longer in his place, was at the dispatch box. And if I recall correctly, he told the House that we would be seeing a consultation on this imminently, and we would see progress coming forth in short order. We are 12 months after that. It is important, very important, to my constituents in West Dorset, and indeed for those who live across the county of Dorset, that actually we do see this police funding formula revision and reform come forward quickly, and I would urge the Minister to take this back to her department and to make the point clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Royal assent.